Relief, or relievo, is a sculptural technique. The term relief is from the Latin verb relevo, to raise. To create a sculpture in relief is to give the impression that the sculpted material has been raised above the background plane. What is actually performed when a relief is cut in from a flat surface of stone or wood is a lowering of the field, leaving the unsculpted parts seemingly raised. The technique involves considerable chiseling away of the background, which is a time-consuming exercise. On the other hand, a relief saves forming the rear of a subject, and is less fragile and more securely fixed than a sculpture in the round, especially one of a standing figure where the ankles are a potential weak point, especially in stone. In other materials such as metal, clay, plaster stucco, ceramics or papier-mâché, the form can be just added to or raised up from the background. Monumental bronze reliefs are made by casting. There are different degrees of relief depending on the degree of projection of the sculpted form from the field, for which the Italian appellations are still sometimes used. The full range includes high relief, where more than 50% of the depth is shown and there may be undercut areas, mid-relief, low relief, and shallow relief or rilievo sciato, where the plane is scarcely more than scratched in order to remove background material. There is also sunk relief, which was mainly restricted to ancient Egypt. However, the distinction between high relief and low relief is the clearest and most important, and these two are generally the only terms used to discuss most work. The definition of these terms is somewhat variable, and many works combine areas in more than one of them, sometimes sliding between them in a single figure. Accordingly, some writers prefer to avoid all distinctions. The opposite of relief sculpture is counter-relief, intaglio, or cavalrelievo, where the form is cut into the field or background rather than rising from it. This is very rare in monumental sculpture. Reliefs are common throughout the world on the walls of buildings in a variety of smaller settings, and a sequence of several panels or sections of relief may represent an extended narrative. Relief is more suitable for depicting complicated subjects with many figures and very active poses, such as battles, than freestanding sculpture in the round. Most ancient architectural reliefs were originally painted, which helps to define forms in low relief. The subject of reliefs is for convenient reference assumed in this article to be usually figures. But sculpture in relief often depicts decorative geometrical or foliage patterns, as in the arabesques of Islamic art, and may be of any subject. Rock reliefs are those carved into solid rock in the open air. This type is found in many cultures, in particular those of the ancient Near East and Buddhist countries. A stela is a single standing stone. Many of these carry reliefs. Types. The distinction between high and low relief is somewhat subjective, and the two are very often combined in a single work. In particular, most later, high reliefs contain sections in low relief, usually in the background. From the Parthenon frieze onwards, many single figures have heads in high relief, but their lower legs are in low relief. The slightly projecting figures created in this way work well in reliefs that are seen from below, as unfinished examples from various periods show. Raised reliefs, whether high or low, were normally blocked out by marking the outline of the figure and reducing the background areas to the new background level. Work no doubt performed by apprentices. Hyphens may or may not be used in all these terms, though they are rarely seen in sunk relief, and are usual in bas relief and counter-relief. Works in the technique are described as in relief, and, especially in monumental sculpture, the work itself is a relief. Bas relief or low relief. A bas relief or low relief is a projecting image with a shallow overall depth, for example used on coins, on which all images are in low relief. In the lowest reliefs, the relative depth of the elements shown is completely distorted, and if seen from the side the image makes no sense. But from the front the small variations in depth register as a three-dimensional image. Other versions distort depth much less. It is a technique which requires less work, and is therefore cheaper to produce, as less of the background needs to be removed in a carving, or less modeling is required. In the art of ancient Egypt and other ancient Near Eastern and Asian cultures, and also Mesoamerica, a very low relief was commonly used for the whole composition. These images would all be painted after carving, which helped to define the forms. Today the paint has worn off in the great majority of surviving examples, but invisible remains of paint can usually be discovered through chemical means. The Ishtar Gate of Babylon, now in Berlin, has low reliefs of large animals formed from molded bricks, glazed in color. Plaster was sometimes used in Egypt and Rome, and probably elsewhere, but needs very good conditions to survive. Roman decorative plaster work is mainly known from Pompeii and other sites buried by ash from Mount Vesuvius. Low relief was relatively rare in Western medieval art, but may be found, for example, in wooden figures or scenes on the insides of the folding wings of multi-panel altarpieces. Low relief is probably the most common type of relief found in Hindu-Buddhist arts of India and Southeast Asia. The low reliefs of 2nd century BCE to 6th century CE Ajanta caves and 5th to 10th century Ellora caves in India are noted for they were carved out from rock-cut hill. They are probably the most exquisite examples of Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain art in India. Most of these low reliefs are used in narrating sacred scriptures, such as those found in 9th century Borobudur temple in central Java, Indonesia, that narrating the birth of Buddha. Borobudur itself possesses 1,460 panels of narrating low reliefs. Another example is low reliefs narrating Ramayana Hindu epic in Prambanan Temple, also in Java. In Cambodia, the temples of Angkor are also remarkable for their collection of low reliefs. The Samudramanthan, or churning of ocean of milk, of 12th century Angkor Wat is an example of Khmer art. Another examples are low reliefs of Apsaras adorned the walls and pillars of Angkorian temples. The low reliefs of Bayon Temple in Angkor Thom also remarkable on capturing the daily life of Khmer Empire. The revival of low relief, which was seen as a classical style, begins early in the Renaissance. The Tempio Malatestiano in Rimini, a pioneering classicist building, designed by Leon Battista Alberti around 1450. Uses low reliefs by Agostino di Duccio inside and on the external walls. Since the Renaissance, plaster has been very widely used for indoor ornamental work such as cornices and ceilings. But in the 16th century it was used for large figures at the Château of Fontainebleau, which were imitated more crudely elsewhere, for example in the Elizabethan Hardwicke Hall. In later Western art, until her 20th century revival, low relief was used mostly for smaller works or combined with higher relief to convey a sense of distance, or to give depth to the composition, especially for scenes with many figures and a landscape or architectural background. In the same way that lighter colors are used for the same purpose in painting. Thus figures in the foreground are sculpted in high relief, those in the background in low relief. Low relief may use any medium or technique of sculpture, stone carving and metal casting being most common. Large architectural compositions all in low relief saw a revival in the 20th century, being popular on buildings in Art Deco and related styles, which borrowed from the ancient low reliefs now available in museums. Some sculptors, including Eric Gill, have adopted the squash depth of low relief in works that are actually freestanding. Mid-relief, half-relief, or mezzo-relievo is somewhat imprecisely defined, and the term is not often used in English, the works usually being described as low relief instead. The typical traditional definition is that only up to half of the subject projects, and no elements are undercut or fully disengaged from the background field. The depth of the elements shown is normally somewhat distorted. Shallow relief or rilievo stiato, used for the background areas of compositions with the main elements in low relief, was perfected by the Italian Renaissance sculptor Donatello. It is a very shallow relief, which merges into engraving in places, and can be hard to read in photographs. High relief is where in general more than half the mass of the sculpted figure projects from the background. Indeed, the most prominent elements of the composition, especially heads and limbs, are often completely undercut, detaching them from the field. The parts of the subjects that are seen are normally depicted at their full depth, unlike low relief where the elements seen are squashed, flatter. High relief thus uses essentially the same style and techniques as freestanding sculpture, and in the case of a single figure gives largely the same view as a person standing directly in front of a freestanding statue would have. All cultures and periods in which large sculptures were created used this technique in monumental sculpture and architecture. Most of the many grand figure reliefs in ancient Greek sculpture used a very high version of higher relief, with elements often fully free of the background, and parts of figures crossing over each other to indicate depth. The metopes of the Parthenon have largely lost their fully rounded elements, except for heads, showing the advantages of relief in terms of durability. High relief has remained the dominant form for reliefs, with figures in Western sculpture also being common in Indian temple sculpture. Smaller Greek sculptures such as private tombs, and smaller decorative areas such as friezes on large buildings, more often used low relief. Hellenistic and Roman sarcophagus reliefs were cut with a drill rather than chisels, enabling and encouraging compositions extremely crowded with figures, like the Ludovici battle sarcophagus. These are also seen in the enormous strips of reliefs that wound round Roman triumphal columns. The sarcophagi in particular exerted a huge influence on later Western sculpture. The European Middle Ages tended to use higher relief for all purposes in stone, though like ancient Roman sculpture their reliefs were typically not as high as in ancient Greece. Very high relief re-emerged in the Renaissance, and was especially used in wall-mounted funerary art and later on neoclassical pediments and public monuments. In Hindu-Buddhist art of India and Southeast Asia, high relief can also be found, although it is not as common as low reliefs. Most of Hindu-Buddhist sculptures, however, also can be considered as a high relief, since these sculptures usually connected to a stela as the background to support the statue, as well as provides additional elements such as aura or halo in the back of sculpture's head, or floral decoration. The examples of Indian high reliefs can be found in Khajuraho Temple, that displaying voluptuous twisting figures that often describes the erotic Kama Sutra positions. In 9th century Prambanan Temple, Central Java, the examples are the high reliefs of Lokapala Devatas, the guardian of directions deities. Sunk relief, sunk or sunken relief, is largely restricted to the art of ancient Egypt, where it is very common, becoming after the Amarna period of Akhenaten the dominant type used, as opposed to low relief. It had been used earlier, but mainly for large reliefs on external walls, and for hieroglyphs and cartouches. The image is made by cutting the relief sculpture itself into a flat surface. In a simpler form, the images are usually mostly linear in nature, like hieroglyphs, but in most cases the figure itself is in low relief, but set within a sunken area shaped round the image, so that the relief never rises beyond the original flat surface. In some cases the figures and other elements are in a very low relief that does not rise to the original surface, but others are modeled more fully, with some areas rising to the original surface. This method minimizes the work removing the background, while allowing normal relief modeling. The technique is most successful with strong sunlight to emphasize the outlines and forms by shadow, as no attempt was made to soften the edge of the sunk area, leaving a face at a right angle to the surface all around it. Some reliefs, especially funerary monuments with heads or busts from ancient Rome and later Western art, lever frame at the original level around the edge of the relief, or place a head in a hemispherical recess in the block. Though essentially very similar to Egyptian sunk relief, but with the background space at the lower level around the figure, the term would not normally be used of such works. Counter-relief sunk relief technique is not to be confused with counter-relief, or intaglio as seen on engraved gem seals, where an image is fully modeled in a negative manner. The image goes into the surface, so that when impressed on wax it gives an impression in normal relief. However, many engraved gems were carved in cameo or normal relief. A few very late Hellenistic monumental carvings in Egypt use full negative modeling as though on a gem seal. Perhaps as sculptors trained in the Greek tradition attempted to use traditional Egyptian conventions. Small objects, small-scale reliefs have been carved in various materials, notably ivory, wood, and wax. Reliefs are often found in decorative arts such as ceramics and metalwork. These are less often described as reliefs than as in relief. Small bronze reliefs are often in the form of plaques or plaquettes, which may be set in furniture or framed, or just kept as they are, a popular form for European collectors, especially in the Renaissance. Various modeling techniques are used, such repoussé in metalwork, where a thin metal plate is shaped from behind using various metal or wood punches, producing a relief image. Casting has also been widely used in bronze and other metals. Casting and repoussé are often used in concert to speed up production and add greater detail to the final relief. In stone, as well as engraved gems, larger hard stone carvings in semi-precious stones have been highly prestigious since ancient times in many Eurasian cultures. Reliefs in wax were produced at least from the Renaissance. Carved ivory reliefs have been used since ancient times, and because the material, though expensive, cannot usually be reused, they have a relatively high survival rate. And for example, consular diptychs represent a large proportion of the survivals of portable secular art from late antiquity. In the Gothic period, the carving of ivory reliefs became a considerable luxury industry in Paris and other centers, as well as small diptychs and triptychs with densely packed religious scenes, usually from the New Testament. Secular objects, usually in a lower relief, were also produced. These were often round mirror cases, combs, handles, and other small items, but included a few larger caskets like the casket with scenes of romances in Baltimore, Maryland, in the United States. Originally they were very often painted in bright colors. Reliefs can be impressed by stamps onto clay, or the clay pressed into a mold bearing the design, as was usual with the mass-produced terra sigillata of ancient Roman pottery. Decorative reliefs in plaster or stucco may be much larger. This form of architectural decoration is found in many styles of interiors in the post-Renaissance West, and in Islamic architecture. Gallery. Sunk relief is low relief within a sunk outline, from the Luxor Temple in Egypt, carved in very hard granite. Low relief within a sunk outline, linear sunk relief in the hieroglyphs, and high relief, from Luxor. Blocked out, unfinished low relief of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. Unfinished Greek and Persian high reliefs show the same method of beginning a work. Extremely shallow ancient Egyptian relief of men presenting oxen, 2500–2350 BC. Bas-relief in Persepolis, a symbol of Zoroastrian Nowruz, in day of a spring equinox. Power of eternally fighting bull, and a lion, are equal. Atropos cutting the thread of life. Ancient Greek low relief. Roman funerary relief with frame at original level, but not sunk relief. The Roman Warren Cup, silver repoussé work. Yaxgalan lintel 24, a Mayan carving depicting a blood sacrifice. Rock relief at Naqshi Rustam, the Persian Sasanian Emperor Shapur I with Roman Emperor submitting to him. The 12th century Romanesque portal of Christ in Majesty at Moissac Abbey moves between low and high relief in a single figure. Harborville triptych, Byzantine ivory. Side view of higher relief. Madonna and Child, marble of c. 1500–1510 by an unknown North Italian sculptor. The elaborate stucco reliefs decorating the Château de Fontainebleau were hugely influential. Low-relief decorative frieze above. Baroque marble high-relief by Francesco Gracia, 1670, Rome. Robert Gould Shaw Memorial, 1897, Boston, combining freestanding elements with high and low relief. A relatively modern high-relief in Bishopsgate, London. Note that some elements jut out of the frame of the image. Art Deco tiled bas-relief. Old Press Citizen Building, Iowa City, Iowa. Elizabeth Winwood's bas-relief at Ryerson University in Toronto. Colossal Hindu rock reliefs at Unakoti, Tripura, India.